Now, the first thing before we begin anything else is I would like to say, first of all, a very big thank you to you, my friend, for taking time out of your day. I'd like to say Hare Krishna to you.
Thank
And
you, Hare Krishna.
I bow to the best of my ability while holding the phone with one hand because my PC has had some issues earlier, so this is improvised, technically speaking. But I would like to say that it is wonderful to finally be here talking with you. And I would also like to say to our audience as well, a big thank you to them, a big thank you to all of you listening to this, because if you've taken time out of your day, out of your evening, whichever time that it is for you, to listen to us speak today and to share this inspiring spiritual story, then I'm very grateful to you, because when we are doing this, it's not about us, it's not about me, and it's not about my dear friend here. And speaking of which, I have to say, when I'm saying your name, Mahabhagavat, am I saying it the right way, or am I completely
It's
murdering?
perfectly correct. Thank you. Though
Right?
the Das, the Das part of it is the most significant part of my name.
Yes, it is. Yes. And this means servant of God, or words to that effect? Yes.
Yes, servant of the servant of God.
Servant of the servant of God. Okay. Well, that is beautiful and very true. Very, very true. So, with all of that being said, I'm pronouncing your name the right way. I'm very happy. And as I've said, for our audience, for all of you listening today, please just listen with an open mind and an open heart. That is all we ask, because this is a journey of transformation. This is a journey showing that fundamentally what one person can do with God's grace, anyone can do. And as we always say, it's not us, it's all God. But at the same time, I do believe we have to get out of our own way and be a little bit less stubborn and allow that process to happen. So this story really does illustrate that. So, my friend, once again, Hare Krishna to you. And
Hare
thank you.
Krishna. I'll start off by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, a few mantras just to establish some auspiciousness and bring in that transcendental vibration into our conversation. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. Once you have given your time and your attention to someone or something, you can never take it back. So our attempt here is to use your time and your attention for your benefit. And if we can serve you in that way, our life will be successful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, my friend, for such a beautiful introduction. As you say, the auspiciousness, I can feel the holiness, as I always can when I hear chanting, and I'm learning to memorize this as well. But that's a story for another time. Meanwhile, today is all about you, and your story is very inspiring. Now, with this, we have options. We can obviously talk about your very early life, but in my mind, I must admit that I'm tempted to begin with the story of when you were first given a holy book by a monk in a railway station, I believe. And this encounter that really changed the course of your life and really was an act of mercy from God, although at the time, as I understand it, it didn't necessarily appear that way. So, may we begin with this time in your life, not only that encounter, but really who you were and where you were in your life at that time, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, as well as physically. Because as I've said, this whole talk is to be of service, and I think this is a important way to begin. So may we begin there, please, my friend.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Liam. I had just graduated uh, with a degree in engineering, bachelor's degree in engineering, and I had done really well academically. So I had won a gold medal. I had it was among probably the first or among the first days of my first job after my training was finished, and I had beaten thousands of other engineers to get one of approximately 20 of these roles. And I was in a very prestigious company, and I was really proud of myself. I thought that I was like the epitome of the success of a young man. That was my consciousness at that point in time. I was really proud, with my chest out like that, and really, really out there. And even though I had always been interested in spiritual life, I was at on that particular day, I was definitely not really open to any uh, instruction or any mercy or any of that sort personally, right? And I saw this. I was going to this office in one of the poshest parts of Bombay or Mumbai, as you like to call it. Um, and I saw this monk, shaven-headed, dressed in saffron robes, about the same age as me, probably in his early 20s himself. And and he had a pile of these books in front of him, and it was the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is a very common text in India. Children learn to memorize it when they are tiny, for example. Not that they understand anything that is in it, but they learn to memorize it, which is auspicious in itself. And I had read about 15 of the different editions of the Gita before I had spotted this one. And so I had already dismissed the Bhagavad Gita completely because all those 15 editions were somehow or the other based on the author's personal opinions. And the Bhagavad Gita is a 5,000-year-old text. Actually, it's at least 2 million years old in human society, but even more older than that. It has been spoken more than 18,000 times in the history of this universe. Uh, Still, um, I felt like it was it was garbage. In plain words, that's what I felt it was. It was a bunch of contradictions, like all other. I had read the Bible before. I have read the Quran. I have read the Torah, which is the Old Testament. I've read, and my conclusion was that these scriptures are a bunch of contradictions that were just compiled to control people or whatever, whatever the mindset was that I had. So I thought, let me read this one and find all the faults with it, and let me add it to my collection and make it the 16th Gita that I have conquered over, like a conquest. Some people collect different kinds of trophies. So this was like my trophy collection back then. And so remember, because this was early in my career, I hadn't actually gotten paid yet. So whatever money I had in my pocket was given to me by my father because I was going into the city and he didn't want me to go without some money in my pocket because you never know what you can need. So remember, I had nothing actually at that point in time of my own, but I was still proud of it that my father had given me some money. It's not a lot of money, but still, you know, given me some money. And here's this monk, and I was feeling pity, like pity for this boy, for this young man. And I was thinking, who has you know, first of all, I assumed that he was stupid because who else but a stupid man shaves his head and stands on the street begging for money, trying to sell some books, right? Secondly, I thought he was lazy because he didn't want to actually work and earn his livelihood and all of that stuff. Like he had chosen to, escape. That's what I felt back then, and I was proud of whatever I had and whatever I had accomplished. And I threw my head back and I said, "How much?" Because I was very proud that, I would give him some money, and and all that. And He looked me up and down a few times, and he said, "For you, free." So I felt insulted that the guy didn't want to take my money. Like this monk, didn't want to take my money. I felt really insulted by that. But I wanted to take the book. I wanted to find all the faults, and I wanted to come back and show him how it's really done. You know, in other words, I wanted him to be my follower back then, right? Be like me, right? And now it's ironic because many of the monks, especially in Bombay, they are super highly qualified. They have been to universities that are like 10 times better than the one that I had graduated from. Like, like they're super brilliant people, really ahead of their years, you can say, in terms of their maturity and their understanding of the purpose of life and so on and so forth. I didn't consider all that stuff because I didn't know the Hare Krishna movement back then, right? So, anyways, I took the book, I flung it into my briefcase, and I walked away, like, without even saying thank you to him or acknowledging anything. I don't know what his name is. I don't remember what he looks like, right? But that was a pivotal moment in my spiritual journey.
Wow. What a way to begin. And part of the reason that I think your story is so powerful, is because how many people are walking in your shoes, so to speak, these days, in the sense that they feel the same way, they have the same attitudes, and the circumstances may well be different, but this feeling of arrogance or puffed upness, as we spoke about earlier, I felt it myself. A lot of it was actually to hide insecurity, but that's another story. But nonetheless, a lot of people walk in these shoes, and so that's why I've chosen to begin there.
Yeah, and I experienced it because, after, I don't know, 30 something years, 25, 30, whatever, I don't remember the number of years exactly. I'm in the shoes of that monk standing on the street with those books often, right? And I experience this probably 1,000 times an hour.
That is amazing. And you deal now with people, arrogant and callous and all of these kinds of things. That is fascinating. It's sort of like full circle.
Yeah, people tell me actually, especially in the streets. I live in Toronto, the streets of Toronto, people have told me, why don't you get a job? Why don't you, like, people say very, very interesting things to me. And, but I see that as a purification.
That is fascinating, the full circle aspect. I will come back to that shortly. I will come back to that topic because that is also a very interesting topic. Before we do, when you read the book though that this monk gave you, I remember reading in an article about you in the Back to Godhead magazine that you wanted to find faults in there, but you couldn't really find many. There may be a few small ones, but nothing to actually turn the case on its head was, I believe, how it was written. May we talk a little bit about that process, as in your process of reading this?
Well, first of all, this book is 5,000 years old. So the cultural context of the Gita is very different from the cultural context that we live in today. What is considered politically correct today was not necessarily how Krishna expresses himself in the Bhagavad Gita, for example. He speaks the truth very directly. And Srila Prabhupada, the translator of the edition of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, that edition, he is also very direct. He does not mince his words. He does not try to be polite. It's almost like, like if you have, if you see a neighbor's house burning, then you're not trying to, excuse me, sir, but I notice that your house is burning. You're like, get out of there. You're really, really urgent. Right? So I think, so his message is like that. So coming from, have been educated in the British system, in the Western sensibilities, etc. Coming from that, the kind of language that Srila Prabhupada used and the kind of concepts that Krishna talks about were hard for me to accept. because they were very different from the worldview that I had grown up with, for example. Also, there was some translation. What I saw as translation errors because I had learned Sanskrit before in my life, and I felt like, hey, this word is not translated properly. That word is not translated properly. It took me years to understand why Srila Prabhupada translated those words in that way. But I chose to just ignore that because the overall message was not, uh, let's say, inconsistent. So I said, okay, I will agree to disagree on this particular point and move on. So I read a few times, and every time I kind of found new faults. But then I realized that these are not really faults of the book, right? So then I like to say that the book found faults in me.
Right. I see. I see. I like that. The book found faults in you. That's a good way of looking at it, actually. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't heard it described as simply as that, but I've also experienced this. Okay, so one of the things that interests me here, my friend, very much is the fact that over time, obviously, you came into this movement and you're doing everything that you're doing today to be of service. And I would, of course, shortly like to talk about the service that you're doing as well, because this article in the Back to Godhead was very much how you transformed, but I would also like to touch on what you're doing. But before we do, one of the things, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, talking about bluntness, one of the things that struck me is you must be a little bit stubborn, because when I was reading through this story, there's obviously a number of years, and I find it fascinating, and I say that because I find it very relatable on a personal level, which I wasn't expecting, but as we were talking about before we began recording. But nonetheless, it obviously took a number of years and a number of different encounters,
man.
attending the temple, different countries, all of these types of things. But really, my theme here is actually to talk about stubbornness, and it's actually to talk about the layers that you had to go through. Because even when we get to the point of, for example, being in the temple itself, and I know this comes a little bit later, but even being in there was still a process where you described being sort of at the back and not actually partaking in the beginning and then beginning to partake. So kind of the way I see it is there's like a series of layers that you had to go through to actually get to where you are now. And I would like to talk about some of those just for the purposes of authenticity for people, in the sense that.
So first, I think first thing that I'd like to do is acknowledge, there are too many actually to name, the number of people who put in their blood, sweat, and tears into me. I think that God's mercy flows through the devotees of God, through the people who have the faith, who are carrying the mercy of God in their hearts. So I feel overwhelmed by that, but I'm really grateful to all those people. And the amount of patience that they have had to have in order to tolerate and give something to an arrogant fool like that takes a lot of kindness, a lot of mercy, a lot of patience, a lot of humility. So I acknowledge that now, through having been through the journey. So, well, first of all, one cannot approach God unless one is completely humble. One cannot actually approach God because when someone thinks that they have something, whether they have money or they have beauty or they have fame or they have power or they have this or that, like wisdom, knowledge, like in my case, it was so many different things like educational qualifications or what have you, youth, the energy and the strength of youth. One actually finds it's very difficult to approach God. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, there are 4 types of people who are described who end up approaching God, right? So Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritun arjuna arto jidnyasur arthati jnani cha bharatarashava is the Sanskrit verse. But what it means, I'm going to paraphrase that, is there are 4 kinds of pious people who surrender to God. because there may be different kinds of people in these four circumstances that I will talk about in a moment who will never surrender to God. In fact, they'll go in the opposite direction because they don't have that interest or desire to, that piety is not there, right? So artho means somebody. Artha means somebody who has been afflicted with some kind of pain. It could be relationship trouble. It could be money problems. It could be, any other thing, like somebody finds themselves in jail, for example, for whatever reason. And artho, they're in some kind of great trouble. Um, Arjuna was in that trouble. He had to, fight with his family members on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So artho, jidnasu, somebody who's inquisitive, somebody who is naturally thinking about, why things happen. Like one of my teachers was 16 years old when he started thinking about, why do people have to die? Why do people have to go old? Just like the Buddha had the similar experience, right? He had those experiences where he saw the miseries of life, and then he was like thinking about these, and he was shielded from that all his life. So some people are inquisitive about this. They're like asking these questions, asking very deep questions that nobody can answer. My spiritual master was asking the question, why should I study? Because he was in university back then at the University of Texas, Sankarshan Prabhu, and he was asking the question to his pastors, to his professors, to his parents, to his everybody, church leaders, like everybody, his camp coordinators, like everybody that he met. He was asking, why should I study? And they said, well, son, so you can get a good job. And why should I get a good job? So you have enough money to buy a house and a car, so you can get a wife and some kids. And so he kept on following that. And he says, okay, so it all ends when I end up 6 foot under and people put some flowers on my grave until they forget all about me. So what's the point of it all? So he was feeling nihilistic at that point in time, like there's no point in it. But he knew that that was not the answer. So he kept inquiring. So the second category is the people a person who's inquisitive. The third category is a person who is artharthi, a person who desires money, right? Who's really, looking for money, who's really in need of money and cannot get it. It's a different kind of pain. Anybody who has not had money all their lives will know about it, right? And then jnani, a person who already knows, a person who already has studied a lot of stuff around them. And there are two kinds of learners: people who have to go through it themselves, and people who see things happening and they manage to not get into that trouble, right? Like dekhe shekhe, or take a shake. It's a Bengali phrase that says you can learn by seeing or you can learn by experiencing yourself. So
Uh,
those four categories. So I think unless that moment comes sometimes where things get very uncomfortable, the journey doesn't start. So even though I was reading the book, the Bhagavad Gita, things didn't hit me until, life really hit me hard. So that was, so then I realized that the people who are being very respectful towards me because I'm paying their salaries or whatever are no longer respectful towards me because, I'm not paying them. They're not making any money off of me anymore, right? The people who used to respect you for whatever reason no longer respecting you. You don't have this, you don't have that. You don't even have, sometimes there was a situation where I didn't even have food to eat, right? And it was like, okay, I actually have nothing, you know. At that point, the instructions of Bhagavad Gita started to make sense because it's like when you're surrounded with all of these different comfortable things, it's really hard. And a person who can do it when they are comfortable, that person is really special, right? Really, really special, right? So anyway, I had to overcome that barrier. I had to overcome the barrier of all my other relationships, right? Like all my friends who are not really interested in spiritual life. Many of them now are, over the years. But at that point in time, most of my friends were not interested in spiritual life. My lifestyle was completely not conducive to spiritual life, right? Like I was traveling between continents, jet setting everywhere, right? Meeting with intensely materialistic people, talking about dollars and cents and euros and pounds and all the time, right? Like it was all about the money, right? It was really hard to get out of that mindset because it's the association we have dictates our own consciousness at any given time. Like we hang out with materialistic people, we become materialistic. We hang out with sad people, we become sad, right? We hang out with, with frivolous people, we become frivolous ourselves, right? So I was with all these high-flying business people all over the world, and it was like, it was just not conducive. So all those barriers had to be overcome gradually uh, before before um, I could actually appreciate the instruction. And then there was one more barrier, which is that even though I had seen it written in the book, I hadn't seen it being lived. Like, because I was not with those people. So I was thinking, I even went to the temple with my wife before all of this, before I came to Toronto, for example, and I saw a bunch of monks. And I'm like, I'm not a monk. I'm not in saffron, right? I'm a business guy, right? I cannot shave my head and sit in the temple with these people, right? So all those barriers, when I came to Toronto, was where I saw that there were people like me working jobs and professions and running businesses and things like that with family and children and so on and so forth who can actually do this. That's when it kind of started seeing, okay, this is how I can incorporate this lifestyle into mine.
That makes sense. The process makes a lot of sense. And once again, it's very relatable. So when we look at your life now, then as well, how does it work in the sense that, because I was trying to figure this out when I read the article as well, if you don't mind me asking, then obviously as a married man coming into this movement, I know you don't have to be a monk, but I was thinking, okay, you're very devoted, but there's got to be something there. And I'm not sure with your profession and other things that you do. So how does it work in terms of these other aspects of life and devotion? And I ask this not to probe into your life, but because you've obviously found a very nice balance across these things.
Yeah. First of all, is to have the proper role models and the proper instructions.
Mm.
If my audio or video is not coming through properly, my internet connections,
No, it's
it
okay.
says my internet connection is unstable. Okay. So first of all is to have the proper role models and the proper, like, you want to have mature guides who are not, like, who are not the man with the hammer. Like, to the man with the hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? If that's the only tool in his toolbox, he's going to try to hammer his way out of everything. So if you have an immature spiritualist who, for example, does not understand that there are many ways of fulfilling the principles, then they're probably going to guide us in a strange way that is not consistent with our psychophysical nature. So we want to have people who are mature in their understanding of the spiritual path. So I had many such role models who showed me how it can be done. In fact, when 2005, when I actually got 2004, when I got into this, I wrote to my spiritual master. I wrote him an email and I said, my dear, Gurudev, I want to renounce life and I want to become a monk. That's what I told him. And my spiritual master said, you're a fool. You're such an idiot. What's going to happen to your wife who has trusted you with her life? Right? What's going to happen to her? So I said, but she's not interested. Okay. And he said, well, then it's your duty to inspire her in this, not just to abandon her when she has, she's from South Africa. My wife is from South Africa. I'm from India. We were in Canada at that point in time. Imagine the turmoil it would have caused in society in general to just abandon this relationship and just do something. And then he would say, and then my spiritual master told me, well, you will just find another woman anyways. And you may find a woman when you're dressed in saffron as a monk with a shaven head. And just imagine what damage it will do to everybody, right?
See,
So you are married at this young age because you wanted to get married. So you have to fulfill your duty of as a married man. And he pointed out that Arjuna was a married man, right? There's so many teachers in our movement. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a married man. Like, you have people of all kinds. You don't have to change your external situation to modify your internal situation. So externally speaking, people may notice some difference. Like, I have a tilak, right, on my forehead. I may not eat certain foods. I may not participate in certain activities. So externally, they may notice some differences. But for the most part, I have remained externally the same. still a family man, right? I still work, right? I still, uh, in the corporate world, I still fight those boardroom battles, right? I still do all of that stuff. But internally, what I do it for has changed. So it's not about changing what you do, it's changing why you do it. So before I would do it because I get a power rush, I get money, I get respect, I can defeat somebody, the pleasure of, destroying a competitor, like all of those kinds of things, right? Were driving me. Or the respect that comes from employing people, for example, like all of that stuff. But now I do this just so that I can be an instrument of God in the world, because everybody is not meant to leave the world, right? Everybody, we all have different purposes in life. So if I, so I am here because this is my psychophysical nature. Arjuna had the same thing. He wanted to go to the forest and beg for a living. And Krishna said, no, you're a fighter, you're a Kshatriya, a fighter. You're going to pick a fight somewhere else anyways. So fight this fight because this is your fight. You have not sought sought it out. It has come to you, right? Because of your nature. So be true to your nature and fight.
I understand. I understand very much. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And as I said, I actually really like and respect the balance, the way that you're still able to live in the world, and also the fact that you're able to maintain the spiritual path. Not that they're separate, because as you say, they are the same thing, and it's the intentions behind them. But I still like the balance, because I have interviewed a number of people, by the way, who are fully fledged monks, and they've given up life and everything like that. So it's
So they have
interesting.
not given up life. Actually, a monk, and that's a deeper understanding also. A monk actually embraces the whole world as his family.
Very true, very true.
So
Well,
they're actually taking on the headaches of everybody, like they talk to somebody who is recovering from drug addiction, whereas, and they are on, like, especially in the Hare Krishna movement, the monks are on like 16, 20 hours a day, right? They're on, right? And they are going because their life, they're wearing saffron because practically speaking, it means that they are in the fire of service.
absolutely. It's amazing. I saw a video actually with when I was telling you earlier, Ratana Swami and his book.
Yes,
I follow him, and I saw a video on there about being in the world but not of the world, where he was speaking on
yes.
this topic, and it makes a lot of sense. So coming back to yourself, you mentioned earlier about the full circle aspect of the preaching and of sharing this wisdom with other people, that you are now in the role in that sense, as it was for the monk once, from
Quite
the.
a bit.
And with that, I'm curious as to your experiences, because what's interesting is it takes a lot of courage. That's the thing that stands out to me. There's a lot of other aspects as well. I mean, you're doing God's work, so you're doing a very noble cause, but still to stand in the street, or to stand up and be counted, if you like, in life in any way, takes a lot of courage. But
Yeah,
to
you're
stand
right
in
about
the
that.
street like that, can you share some of your experiences? Because as you mentioned earlier, you're meeting all kinds of people. You're meeting, rude and callous people, and pleasant and lovely people, and everything in between. And you're trying to lead by example, really,
Yeah,
which is something wonderful about you, by the way, as you do lead
yeah.
by example. Can we talk a little bit
It's
about that?
it's actually a great privilege to be in a situation where you can either introduce someone to God, or to uh, to help them along on their journey. It's a great privilege because, to be honest, God doesn't need us. He can do all of that directly. He can do all of that personally directly. He's omnipotent. He's omnipresent. He's in everyone's heart. He can actually make that happen. So the fact that God is saying, "Okay, here, be my instrument," is such a great privilege, right? Because everybody in the material world, we are people who have turned away from God. That's why we are here. There are people, there are souls who have never left the spiritual realm. They are called the Nitya Siddhas, right? They are perfectly in harmony with God, really comfortable in their relationship with God, and really happy serving Him. and just doing whatever it is that is required very actively and very enthusiastically. Never have the envy that brings someone into the material world. So that's the original sin is the desire to be God. That's what it is, right? And we see that in our world. Everybody wants to be number one. Every businessman, no matter how much money he has, wants to be even more, wants to get even more, even more, even more, right? Or even the little ant, like you put your finger in the ant's path. The ant is not going to say, okay, you're a higher power than me. What do you want me to do instead? The ant will try to go around your finger, try because no everybody is trying to be number one in this world. So um, for me, when I meet arrogant and rude, unpleasant people, it's a reminder of who I still am. At the core of me, there is some part of me that is not 100% pure hearted. My spiritual master constantly tells me is that the only reason that you are still in any kind of material consciousness is because you are not a pure devotee of God. He constantly tells me that, right? So all of this is a reminder, like, there's a saying that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. In Sanskrit, there is a phrase that goes, Atmavat Pashyato Jagat. I see the world as I am. So if, for example, I meet a rude and unpleasant person, and I actually address, like, react to them according to their rudeness or their unpleasantness, then what is the difference between somebody who's on the spiritual path and somebody who is not? Right? Because everybody is going to react to somebody's rudeness or unpleasantness anyways, like tit for tat, right? But where is the compassion that will allow them a moment to experience something that is related to God? Something God, they are like that because they have actually never experienced the kind of mercy of God, really. So how can so it's such a great privilege actually to do that. But ultimately it is self-interest, okay? I'll tell you that. So whenever a preacher goes out or whenever somebody goes out to try to help somebody, my spiritual master and his spiritual masters have said it before, is that primarily we help ourselves because we strengthen our own faith. We are telling people something that we are saying it first and foremost to convince our own mind, right? That this is what it is. You may
Yeah.
not accept it today wholeheartedly, but this is what it is. And the other person simply becomes a an instrument for us to advance in spiritual life. Even though we are trying to help, primarily we are helping ourselves. God helps those who help themselves. So trying to share the mercy of God with others is a primary way of helping ourselves. And if somebody else is helped in the process, that is again God's mercy because nobody can do anything against their will, right? Like you cannot force anybody to do anything. Anybody, even the smallest child, we cannot force them to do something. So ultimately speaking, um, and there is another esoteric thing that I will disclose to you right now. So in the Bhagavatam, there is a verse uh, which basically says that when God in the heart of the other person, because God lives in everybody's heart. In Christianity, it's called Holy Spirit. In Sanskrit, it's called Paramatma, the super soul, who oversees all of us and which is the voice of our conscience, we call it, right? So God lives in everybody's heart. So really, God is actually testing my purity of delivery of the message. If is it free from false ego? Is it free from pride? Is it free from greed or lust or any of those bad qualities? Is it free? He's testing that, and and he's simultaneously testing that, and he's testing that soul's intention to turn to God. Are you ready for me yet? So when my message is pure-hearted, and when that person is willing to accept the message, then the connection happens and we both move forward. Otherwise, if my message is pure-hearted but the other person is not willing, I still get the benefit because God is pleased with my effort. That's all. Like unlike in the material world where you have to complete something, you have to close a deal in order to make the dollars, right? So many deals can be on the table, but you don't close it, you don't get anything. You have to finish your degree in order to get a actual degree, right? You have to make a profit at the end of the year in order to say that I'm a profitable business, right? In material world, it's all about the success. But in the spiritual realm, it's all about the effort. That's it. If my effort is there, then I advance whether that person benefits or not. And if that person is willing, then that person advances also.
I understand. It actually makes a lot of sense, but I'm taking it in because I've felt that, if you like, on a sort of instinctive level, I guess is the best way to put it. But I haven't ever really been sure, in the sense that I know, for example, even when I'm doing these, it helps others, but it helps me as well. And like even as we're talking now, I'm learning a lot. I'm going to go away, make notes, put it into practice, these kinds of things. But I understand that the intentions as well, the effort, it makes a lot of sense. So coming back to you combining, the material life and the spiritual life, if you don't mind me asking, my friend, what is your business, your profession outside of us? I say outside of, but from some people's perception, separately too, I understand the connection better than you may think, and how we can use our worldly actions as a tool to help people and to be closer to God, all of these things. But from some people's perception, listening to this, they'd be thinking, gosh, that's interesting. And it's almost like a contradiction, especially the corporate world. So if you don't mind me asking, what is your work outside of this kind of thing that we're talking about today?
I'm a technology person, so
Okay.
IT you can call it, IT technology, software engineering, security, that sort of stuff. And I work as a chief technology officer in an insurance company, which I helped to start up several years ago. Now, even though I'm in it, uh, I may be on my way out in the sense that, uh, you know, I'm already 50 years old. Uh, I need to spend more of my time doing the direct service of God, uh, teaching, uh, doing that. Many of my teachers have already said that it's time for you to start disengaging from this stuff. Like in Bhagavad Gita, there's a very interesting principle, which is that for a beginner on the path of yoga or a path of connection to God, work is said to be the means.
Mm.
And for a person who is experienced in the path, the cessation of work is said to be the means. So I'm entering that phase of my life where that aspect of my life is probably going to draw to an end in the next few years, gradually or suddenly, depends on how things happen. That which gives me more time to do this. So now, for example, if you look back to my spiritual master's instruction in 2004, 20 plus years ago, I'm not inclined to go out there and start a new business. I'm not inclined to, to try to get more money, for example. Not inclined to do that. So therefore, it is safe for me to give that up because I won't be distracted. Less likely to be distracted. There's no guarantees, but less likely to be distracted. So yes,
Absolutely.
I still work. I still pay my dues to society. It's my karmic reactions, right? I've got to pay my taxes. I've got to do these things.
Absolutely. But no, as I've said already, I admire that as well. And what you said earlier as well about the effort and the importance of the effort, the meaning, and so forth. The other thing I find interesting is I look at that in a way as the fact that you're leading by example. In other words, you're leading by your effort. And in some instances, it might be direct, as in you give someone a book, you bring them to attend a temple, whatever. But sometimes there's a lot of other instances where people look at you and think, okay, you know what he's doing, living this way while still being in the material world, especially the corporate world at that in its perception, is very inspiring. And I agree with that sentiment, and as we were talking about earlier, being a married man and all of this, I think that really sort of cuts through a perception that a lot of people have of what it means to be spiritual in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. It's the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is summarized in this phrase, Sanskrit phrase called Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya means applied renunciation, which is strange because renunciation people think to be giving up things. But there's a 16th century saint named Rupa Goswami, who was a direct disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our disciplic succession. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started the Hare Krishna movement 500 plus years ago, and his phrase is that there are two extremes. I'll say the Sanskrit. Okay, so one of them is um, one extreme is uh, that uh, if you प्रापंचिकतया बुद्ध्या हरि संबंधी वस्तुनः मुमुक्षुभिः परित्यागो वैराग्यम फल्गो कथ्यते. So if you say that everything here is worldly and because it's worldly I shall give it up, prapanchikataya, thinking that it's part of the prapancha, the five material elements, it belongs to the five material harisam, even though it can be used in the hari sambandhi vastuna in the service of God, that kind of renunciation is shallow. It is renunciation, but it's a shallow kind of renunciation. So Rupa Goswami's ideal is anasaktasya vishayan yatharham upayunjatah nirbandhe Krishna sambandhi yuktam vairagyam uchyate, which means without being attached anasaktasya vishayan to the objects of sense gratification that are around you. Anasaktasya vishayan yatharham upayunjatah, using it in the service of Krishna, using it in the service of God. Nirbandhe Krishna sambandhi, just without being entangled with the specific things, using it in the service of Krishna. Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. That is the path of the Bhagavad Gita, the golden mean, where you're neither attached nor detached, you're unattached.
I understand. It makes a lot of sense. But then when you are in the world from this point of view and you maintain this spiritual practice for so many years, how do you resist those temptations? In other words, if there is a temptation in there to make, a massive amount of money from a particular deal, or if there's, I don't know, a beautiful secretary or something that starts working in your office or something, she's got a nice
Yeah,
dress,
yeah.
like, oh wow, these kinds of things. Um, Saying that you're still married, so I maybe that,
Yeah, it's perfectly valid example. These things have happened before.
and you
Um,
resist it. You resist. How do you?
you don't have to, like, people think that I'm struggling with, people think that spiritual people must be feeling so deprived. Spiritual people must be feeling so repressed. But in the Bhagavad Gita, both suppression and repression are actually frowned upon, which is one of the reasons why my spiritual master told me to remain in family life, right? Because I would be suppressing my desires at that point in time, right? So, when you practice spiritual life, when you chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra with any kind of uh, proper effort, with proper guidance, etc., while trying to follow the lifestyle that is around it, over the period of time, the taste for material attraction decreases. So, for example, you might see a pile of money in front of you, but you don't really care about it unless it can be used in the service of Krishna. So, there are people, there are very successful businessmen, very successful actors, like very successful people in Krishna consciousness, even monks who deal with a lot of money, right? Externally, it appears that they're making business deals or whatever like that, but they're keeping nothing for themselves, right? They are using it 100% in the service of Krishna. So, if I was a 25-year-old man and there was a beautiful secretary in my office, and if I was still in the mood of like being in a family way or whatever, like being in that kind of way, then the spiritual master would then advise you to marry this girl, make her your duly wedded wife, and practice Krishna consciousness with her. Right? Not just like a physical thing that you just do this for a couple of months and then forget about it or whatever. Not like that, right? But now, if the beautiful secretary comes to my office, I would think about how can this girl be successful in her life? Definitely not by marrying an old man like me, right? So it would be different. The consciousness is that how can I benefit this girl? So the consciousness is like the feeling that I have is like as if I'm her father, even though I'm not her father, right? Like that.
I understand. I
So I
understand.
mentor lots of young men and women, right? Many of these people are young enough to be my children. So even though they may not feel that way, I feel that way towards them.
I understand. You know what's interesting about this, though, my friend? It is that I've noticed as well, even in my own life, even in the short time we're talking about, and the spiritual path for me was, previously Buddhism and other things, and all of this movement we're talking about today is maybe the past year or so. So it's very new, and I say that. But even in that short time I've been learning and trying to figure some things out, I've noticed a change of attitude. Somebody cuts me up in traffic, and
Oh, yes.
rather than getting out to, argue with him at least, I start thinking, you know what, maybe he's had a really bad day at the office, or he's getting divorced, or his mother is ill and he's on his way to the hospital, or in
Or
fact,
he's just the guy who's a bad driver. What
yeah,
can you do about it?
right, exactly. And but this sort of thing, in other words, it's not to do with me. And even the fact it could be good news, he could be on his way, maybe his wife's having a baby, maybe he's racing, it's good news. The point is, you never know.
Yeah, I
And
love that attitude.
I start thinking, well, then I'm not consciously thinking of it. I'm in the situation and it's just there. It's just like, oh, okay, I didn't used to feel like that. I used to feel very angry. So it's again a very relatable message that you shared there about the transformation. But with the chanting, though, I mean, when I speak to the monks, I've interviewed, as I mentioned, a number of monks at different levels, and they do sort of 2 hours a day or more, a lot of
Yeah,
time.
me too.
But okay, so how do you fit that in, being a businessman as well
First
as
thing in the morning. First
okay,
thing in the morning.
yeah.
First, I wake up early. My day, they started late today for my standards, so I started at 4:30 today. But by the time I completed see, it's like the first part of the day, you save yourself by putting yourself in the right consciousness, so that the rest of the day you can invest in service to others. Because if you are trying to serve others, but you're not full inside, then there'll be a depletion, and there'll be a, like a depression. You might take on somebody else's consciousness, etc., etc. So in the morning, you do that. You coat yourself in this armor, uh, and you go out there, like this tilak is a part of the armor, for example. Like anybody who sees that, whether they know it or not, they benefit from it.
Mm.
Whether I have an interaction with them or not, just the fact that they see me around with this shape on my forehead, maybe they think about it, or maybe they wonder what, or they just notice that some interesting shape out there, they will benefit. It will reduce their amnesia by just a little bit.
And you always have that, even in the office and
I
everything.
have it in the office. It took me a while to grow into it, but my spiritual master tells me of the story of how he started doing it. It's a very inspiring story. I'm not sure if we have enough time to share it. Uh,
Yes, I would love to hear it as
so he was a in he was a monk for many years, and his seniors instructed him that we need examples of married devotees in the movement. So you need to get married. You have been chosen to get married. Was an order from his superiors, and he was like, okay, I will. Who do you want me to marry, right? Like, because it was for the service of Krishna, and they said, there's this girl here from Fiji that we want you to get married, right? Different culture, different race, like everything is different about them, but they got together, and his wife, they're both in their late 70s, so more than 30, 40 years ago they did this. They got together and they both had a conversation, and the bride said to the groom, you know what, I really don't want to have this family life stuff. I want to focus on being a missionary. And my spiritual master, Sankarshan Prabhu, said, oh, thank goodness. I was hoping that I would find a wife like you if I had to get married. And then on the day of their wedding, they decided to enter the next ashram called the Vanaprastha ashram, which is those who live in the forest, practically speaking. They don't literally live in the forest, but that they're living very simple and living for that. So but when he got married, he had to find a job, because you have to still support your wife even if you don't have a family life, right? So you have to support the home and all of those things that are required to make sure that it's you're not like putting your wife at risk of all kinds of terrible things. So he had to work. So one of the jobs he worked at was as a salesman. He was back in the day when long distance sale telephone plans were a thing. He was selling long distance plans for MCI, the telephone company. And you know, like many people, they wipe off their tilak, they hide their neck beads, and they kind of put on a suit, put on a tie over it, and basically pretend not to be a spiritual person when you go to work. Like people might hide their cross if they feel like their boss doesn't support it, right? So he did that for a few days. But one day he had enough and he says, I don't care if I lose this job, but I'm going to put on my tilak because I am tilak, tilak is me, right? And he went into the office and he was feeling so happy and joyful when he was selling that he was making sale after sale after sale after sale after sale. And his manager, you know that sales managers make a commission off of their salespeople's earnings, right? Their sales. So
Yeah.
he was like, Mr. Bridge, I don't care. I don't know what it is that is on your forehead, but from now on, you must wear it every day because it's like it means more money for me, right? Like that's what it means for the manager. So my spiritual master was really happy when I heard that story. I was like, I should try this. And in the beginning, I was like not confident, so I would be very light. It would be like, and then people would say things like, "Hey, you have got some lotion on your forehead. Like if there's some smear, some smudge on your forehead." Until I started to get more and more confident about it. And then I said, I'm going to wear a full proper tilak, like as I do at home, I'm going to be at the office. I'm going to be my full authentic self, right? I'm not going to hide anything from anybody. Though I'm not necessarily going to be in their face preaching about stuff. I'm just going to be myself. And then a few conversations later, like some people were curious, some people were trying to make fun of me. And then, you meet in the corporate world different kinds of people. So, so I said things like, "What is that on your forehead?" They said, "He says, Tom, be careful. That's my war paint, right?" Or somebody is curious, you actually tell them it's a meditation. Like these are the feet of, they represent the lotus feet of God on my head. So I always remain humble to the will of God. It reminds myself and everybody else that I am not this body. I'm living in this body, but I'm passing through. Right? So many different philosophical explanations are there for those who are interested. But for the most part, no problem.
Wow. That is amazing. That is an amazing story, and I'm glad that you did share that because it's actually very inspiring, you know. I mean, it's interesting because on a different level, on it's less than what you're talking about. But even when I chose to move my interviews in this direction, you know, and it goes from sports people to spiritual people, and people are looking at that thinking, hey, you know, what's happened to him? You know, it was a similar type of thing, but then at the same time, it's very inspiring for them because now I get a lot of support. But it's very interesting. So the last thing I want to ask you today, because of our time and your time and everything that we've been talking about, is about your future plans, because you mentioned earlier about sort of coming out of that corporate world and devoting more time. And I just wanted to ask you very briefly um, what that would sort of involve, as in, I'd imagine you'd be teaching and passing on to the next generation to some degree. I think you're doing that already, but I would imagine there would be more of that process.
Yeah. I mean, there are millions of people around the world who don't have enough spiritual guidance in their lives. And there are people, spiritual people, but not enough of us.
Mm,
So um, there are often very innocent people who all they need is a little nudge and they will wholeheartedly jump in the water of spiritual life and swim happily ever after. Um, because, but the living entity, the jiva, has a very special quality. It's open to suggestions. We are all open to suggestion, right? That's why advertisements work, right? So because we are open to suggestion, we see something 7 times and then we feel, I gotta have that. That's the philosophy. They want you to see an ad for a particular thing 7 times from the time you reach your, right, you start out in the day in the morning and you go to your workplace, you're in your workplace, you come back from your workplace, you come home. On your way home, you stop at the grocery store. They want you to see a certain brand of drink 7 times during that day. So they put it at the bus stop, they put it at the, on your train, they put it in on your screen when you're working, like if you're looking at for something. They do these things 7 times. And then in the evening, when you're going back, you stop at the grocery store and you say, I need that drink. Because they have made enough suggestions throughout the day that you feel like you need it. So if we, all of us, those of us who are interested in spiritual life, go out there and make spiritual suggestions by the way we by the way we present ourselves, by the way we act, by going out on and chanting the names of God on the street, by distributing books, by distributing prasad. If more of us make spiritual suggestions in the world, there will be more spiritualists and less materialists because we are open to suggestion. So my goal is to spend my life making spiritual suggestions to everybody around me. Whether it's the way I dress or what I speak about, or the books that I carry in my hand, or the consciousness that I exude. So if I can do that, I will be. It will be a great privilege and a life well spent. Otherwise, I think the first half of my life so far was mostly a wash because I was just living for the pleasure of my own senses. Complete waste of time.
Well, that is a beautiful calling, and I look forward to keeping updated with you, if I may, after this call today, as to your next steps
Yeah, I
and
look forward to it. I look forward
everything,
to it.
everything that will develop from this.
Let me say this before we end, Liam. People like you are rare in the world, and I hope that you you can continue to stay on the spiritual path, and that you can progress. You can find the right spiritual shelter in your life. You can chant the names of God. Whether it's the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is really really powerful, but any other names of God as you see yourself being called towards. But I pray that we all can work together to re-spiritualize this world and make it without miseries.
Absolutely. Well, so do I, but thank you for the kind words there, my friend.
Thank you.
I'm doing my best, it's been a process, it's been a long, winding road, but it's my life has changed beyond measure. That's what I'm going to say. My heart, my way of being, my way of dealing with people, all of these things.
I
So
can see that.
I hope it will continue. Well, you didn't see me before, but
No, no, I can see what you are right now.
thank you. And in the future, hopefully, that will be even more by God's grace. But in the meantime, today we have done some beautiful service together, both of us as instruments of God's grace. This is not just one instrument, to people here playing like a piano, a guitar, something, but today we put two instruments together and we form in a little band here to play.
Harmony.
Yes, harmonizing to play God's music
Yeah.
for more
Yeah.
listeners. So it's been an honor, a joy. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I'm just so grateful for you, not only being here with your time, but also the openness and the actually the vulnerability. I'm going to say in a way because we've delved into some personal aspects of your life, and I appreciate you sharing those for the benefit of other people. So on that sense, thank you very, very much, my friend. And Hare
Can
Krishna.
you, Liam, can we end, since you know the Hare Krishna Mahamantra already, can we chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra? Like I can chant it and then you can chant it, and that's how we can end this particular session. Is that possible?
What I have at the moment, because I'm new to this, is I have it actually on here, and I'm reading it, so I don't have it memorized. I have
That's
it.
okay. You can read it, but because it's Zoom, we may not be able to do it together because it just doesn't work, right? But if we can chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra together, even one after the other, I think it will be a great service to God basically.
Absolutely, we can do
Yes.
that.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Wonderful. And I'm still here, my friend. I'm just pulling it up on my Zoom. so that I can read it, because that will be easier for me. Because as you know, I'm new to this, so it's easier. Here we are.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for chanting.
It's okay. Right, let's do it. I'm back with you. Can I keep it on the screen? I have to do it like this. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama.
The other way. The Hare Krishna first.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you so much, Liam. I'm very grateful to you.
My pleasure. I've been reading it. Like you, it took a long time for the humbleness. It took a long time to come out of the intellectualization and come into my heart. So that is a new part of the process. But yeah, it's a beautiful feeling beyond anything. And all I can say to anyone listening to this, try it. Please do try it, and you will see.
Can we somehow put it on the screen so people know?
Yes, we may be able to. Bear with me. I'll see if I can share my screen.
And then we can try to chant together so that everybody can maybe chant with us while they're watching this.
So, as far as I know, can you see?
Here we go. Yes, I can see this.
Wonderful.
Yes, yes. Together. 1, 2, 3. Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna,
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 Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare, Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare
Hare, Rama,
Rama, Rama
Rama,
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 Hare
Hare,
Hare.
Hare.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Liam.
Let's stop the share. My pleasure. Yes, people can see it, and maybe for the first time they are seeing that. So that is a beautiful thing, and I hope that it brings more people to God's light and to love. So wonderful, my friend. What a way
Thank
to
you,
go.
Liam.
Hare Krishna to you. Have a
Hare
wonderful
Krishna
day.
to all of you watching this also. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, my friend.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.